Nailed it. All right. So Design & Co. is a brand strategy and design agency. And Tim and Nancy, I'm going to count on you to correct me when I go afoul of your description. But Design & Co. offers design across all digital and print media. They offer branding, business strategy, photography and video, and writing to their clients. Since the firm's founding in 2001, Design & Co. has received 16 regional and 2 national communication awards from SMPS and an American Graphic Design Award from Graphic Design USA. Their client list, as I've already alluded to, includes a veritable who's who of Boston AEC firms and beyond, including Ann Beha, ARC, Bergmeyer, Brunner-Cut, CBT, Elkes Manfredi, LeMessurier. I mean, it's alphabet soup, many others as well. So at Design & Co., we are joined today from Design & Co. We're joined today by Tim Downing and Nancy Jenner. So Tim is a co-founder, owner, and design principal at Design & Co. His background is in architecture. And prior to co-founding Design & Co., he practiced at several firms across Boston. So what does Tim bring to his projects? According to his website's bio, he offers uncommon candor, so look out everybody, insight, and an unfailing loyalty to a client's value proposition and future success. From that description, what I have taken away is that he also brings an excellent team of copywriters, because that is very well said. Tim, it is wonderful to have you with us today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. That was very gracious, Kate, and I have nothing to add. That was great.
And I'd also like to introduce Nancy Jenner, who is a brand strategist at Design & Co. Nancy is an innovative collaborator. She's a strategic thinker. She's a researcher, and she's a strategist. And she brings extensive experience in brand development and management. Her background includes publishing and editing, and her executive career includes having served as a senior researcher and brand strategist at Manelli, a national brand strategy and design firm. She was the director of communications and strategic partnership at North Bennett Street School. And for this group, I have buried the lead because Nancy also served as the deputy director and director of the Boston Society of Architects for over a decade. So Nancy, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to be here and to see a few familiar names. And
yeah, me too.
People. Yeah. Thank you.
So without further ado, if you want to, share your screen or lead us in, I have made you a co-host. I have made you a Tim co-host. Do not take this power for granted.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. So here we have, let me see if I can get it to play as a slideshow. All right, does everyone see the screen? Yes, good. Okay, we're gonna jump right in. This is What's Your Special Sauce? And we had fun kind of coming up with this graphic and this title because it really talks about, at the heart of this is we're gonna do some brainstorming and try and figure out how does a firm or a company think about thought leadership? How do they think about building perception around their expertise? So we're going to start, we already did introductions. We'd love to have everyone introduce themselves, but it's just not feasible on this remote presentation. We're going to talk about sort of the definitions of perception and thought leadership, and then get into some exercises. So the middle part of this morning, this talking will go quiet and there'll be some prompts, and we're going to have you take some notes and really start thinking about your own firm, your own role, and how you might build some thought leadership for the next year and beyond. And then we'll have discussion and we have some examples at the end, and hopefully we'll get to those and be able to talk a little bit more about how other people are doing it. So we're going to start here. I need to figure out how to move, whoops, not that, but this. Okay, I'm minimizing all of you. So the definition of perception in marketing, customer perception is how you build customer awareness, their impressions and opinions about your business, products, and brand. Customer perception is shaped by many things, including direct and indirect interactions with your company. And it's really important to remember that perceptions may or may not be accurate or true. There's often misperceptions, especially for firms and companies that have been around for a long time and may have evolved, but still have kind of established understanding of what they do. And what Tim and I do, and our colleagues at Design and Company, is we help clients build perception. And today we're going to talk about thought leadership, but we do this many ways. The details of a logo, how a website interacts, how you show your firm's work. Thought leadership, which is the kind of heart of what we're going to talk about today, is the process of increasing the visibility of expertise and accelerating market influence to accomplish goals, such as building brand strength and generating new business. So once again, this is about increasing the visibility of the expertise. How is your firm or company, what do you do that you want people to know about? And then how do we best put that information out into the world? So this is a glass. We all know that this is a glass. How do we know that it's a drinking glass? Because we've been familiar with these since we were toddlers and they were first introduced to us. It's the reason to have this in the screen is to make sure that we understand that perception is something that's built. It's not something that's that we're born with. If an alien dropped down from outer space, they may or may not know that this is a drinking glass, but we know it's a drinking glass because we've mapped our understanding to that object. This is a drinking glass with liquid in it. And there's a familiar phrase, is your glass half full or half empty? And that's a reminder that we can be looking at the same thing. We can be looking at this glass with fluid in it. And some of us will see it as half full and some of us will see it as half empty. And that comes from a lot of things. It comes from, I don't know, do we have a headache? How did we wake up this morning? What's been going on in our world? What did our mother always say? So once again, we understand things built on our histories and how our perceptions have been shaped. This is a black mark on a white background. And it's a word. And you can look at it and you may see a word. If I told you that the word is good, you may not have seen that at first. If I told you the word was evil, you may not have seen that first. There's both words here. They're opposites, but they're in one mark. Often in these kinds of exercises, once someone says, oh, that says evil, that's all you're going to see. Or if that says good, because I'm helping you understand this mark. I'm helping shape your perception of what this is. Here's another one. And now that you know the trick, you probably see the hidden word or what could be seen as the hidden word. But if I tell you that this word says me, maybe you'll see me. Maybe you saw you. It says both in one word. And once again, how do we help people understand this? So a firm is not like this. It's not a picture on a screen in a Zoom meeting, but often there's multiple understandings and perceptions of your firm, and you want people to understand it one way. So you need to help shape their perception, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. One more exercise in this realm, and this is a fun one. And I like doing this one because it's paintings, and I'm a painter as well as a brand strategist. So we have three modern paintings, a Picasso, the musicians, Mondrian, and a Kandinsky. And this exercise, if you look at these, you see three paintings. If I say which one best represents an airline, chances are you're going to focus on one or another. If I say which one best represents, if you were the brand strategist for a presidential campaign and you had to pick one of these images to represent your candidate, which one would you pick? Similarly, if I said, you need to, it's an exercise, pick one that best represents your company. You might pick one or another, depending on what you are. So if you're an airline, and when I do this in a live room, I ask people, which one do you pick? And most people pick the Mondrian because they want an airline to follow the rules. They want it to stay within the lines. Funny phrase someone said to me once is, I like the Kandinsky, but I want my plan to land one day. So, you know, you have understandings of what you want an airline to be. A presidential candidate, most people will pick the Picasso. The Mondrian is a little too tight, a little too rigid. The Kandinsky is beautiful, creative, and full of joy, but you want your presidential candidate to be a collaborator. You want them to work with others. So that was my sort of fun introduction here. Now we're going to get into the special sauce. So the next few slides, it's going to get a little quiet. I could pause here and see, does anyone have any questions? I see there's one thing in the chat. Do we want to pause or we want to keep going?
Thing in the chat is me telling people they can put things in the chat. But does anybody other than me have anything other than that to say or ask? I was interested in your definition of thought leadership because I mean, it had to do entirely with perception. It didn't have anything to do with, I don't think with like thought content. And I think people think of thought leadership as some body of work or research, ideas first and not the perception of them. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, well, I think the next part we're going to get into is really sort of building up what are the things that your firm, what's the expertise, what's the special sauce at your firm or company that you want to highlight. And I think a lot of people think thought leadership is something that's going to, you know, be an extra thing that they have to layer on to what they do. But really what thought leadership is often is shining a light on what you're already doing and finding ways to bring that out into the public. So if you're an engineer and you are working on sort of older buildings and helping them restore them, and you're working with masonry or something, or I'm making all this up, there might be sort of innovations that you've come up with for restoring masonry in old buildings. That's thought leadership. That's something that you do all the time. But if people know that you have that kind of expertise, then they're going to come to you when they have that kind of project. So you be strategic about it. You highlight the things that your firm does that are unique and special and where your expertise lies based on what you want to do. What are your marketing goals? What are your business goals? So it's kind of a puzzle that you put together. So let's get into this little bit of exercise. So I have three slides with questions on them, and I'm going to give everyone about 3 minutes for each slide, which is not a lot of time, but enough to start jotting down some things. And I believe this we can make these questions available to you as you after the workshop. And these are the kinds of questions that Tim and I will ask when we're doing a brand strategy project and we interview the leaders of a company or a firm. And we'll ask them, what does your firm or company do really well? And what is your firm or company known for? And is what your firm and company is known for, is that the same thing as what you do really well? There might be things that you feel that you do really well that the company's not known for, or things that the company's known for that you want to highlight. Who are the experts in your firm and what is their expertise? So once again, when you're building a thought leadership strategy, you'll want to know who those experts are and what their expertise is. And you're going to use them. You might ghostwrite for them. You might profile them. Or you might interview them to get at that. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes here. It's 8:37. We'll give you a couple more minutes to make some notes. to put up the second set of questions here. You can continue to work on the first set as you start to think about this next one. And this has more to do with goals and existing perceptions. So what do you wish people knew about your firm or company? And are there any misperceptions? Is there anything that you hear about your company, or new employees might come in with an idea that is really not really true anymore to what your company is? So this is, once again, sort of things that you want people to know, and maybe some things that you want to change in terms of people's understanding. And then on a scale of 1 to 10, with 0 being the most traditional, 10 being the most avant-garde, where's your firm? And how is that how it's perceived? So there's no right or wrong answer here. Traditional firms are not bad, they're just traditional, and avant-garde firms are avant-garde. And often perception or building sort of thought leadership around sort of your firm, you want to approach it in a way that is also true to the culture and the nature of your firm. So for example, a insurance company or a bank might want to be perceived as really traditional. They want to showcase their strength in their history. And a more avant-garde firm that's doing sort of innovative thinking might want to be perceived that way. So even where you might publish your thought leadership, the tone of it will be affected by what you want people to understand about your firm in that range. So it's 8:40. We'll give you a couple minutes here to look at this one. Think about this. I'm going to pull up the third of these. The silence is hard, I'll tell you.
You want elevator music? I can do that.
No.
You're doing a great job, Nancy.
It's just hard to know where people's heads are at. So this last one's a little fun, and it has to do with personality. And once again, we're trying to create a round picture of your firm. When you're in your notes, we want to look at sort of the hard things like your expertise, but we also want to look at what's the personality, what's the culture in your firm, and that will also help you understand how do you want to put your thought leadership out in the world. If you're so. Without leading you, imagine you're a firm or company as a person. What one word best describes the firm or the person, the firm as a person? And what word best describes what they are not? And then once again, is that how your firm is perceived? So we're getting to something here. We're trying to understand, have sort of the bucket of things, your goals for how you want your company, what kind of expertise, what your special sauce is that you want to highlight, and also maybe some misperceptions and misunderstandings that you want to try and clear up with this thought leadership work. Here's our working music. Thanks to Kate. And these can be fun exercises to do with leadership teams at your company. If you're want to get people engaged in these ideas about sort of putting your expertise out into the market, it's nice to engage sort of others in the work that you do. So this can be fun too, if you can even have people draw a person, draw your firm as a person. And it can be a wonderful way to sort of see people, to see if there's consensus, young and hip, or if everyone's drawing the old white man, you might have a problem. So. Going to give you one more minute. One more little aside while you guys are thinking, that when we do this exercise with groups or do it in a survey, we find that when we ask people to pick 3 or 4 words that describe what a company or an organization is not, there's often more consensus around that. So there's often a lot of consensus around what are we not? You know, we're not this, we're not that, but maybe some less consensus around what one word best describes you. And if we go into an organization and we find that some people pick the same word, because often we do this, if we're doing it in a survey, we give them words and we ask them to choose. We might have some people that pick a word that best describes the organization, and other people will pick that same word for what best describes what the organization is not. And then you understand that you have this, you have a real interesting conflict, not necessarily a bad one, but then you have to work with your team, with your client, to understand, well, which one is the one that you want to lean towards. If you're perceived as both, how do we help shape the understanding to go in the way that works best for the company? Sometimes it's a generational shift. You'll see that younger people, and often when we do surveys, we'll striate people by how long they've worked in an organization. You'll find that newer recruits and hires feel one way. The people that have been legacy people that have founded the company or been there for a long time might have a different understanding or perception. So let's move on. I'm going to do one more little talking bit, and then we're going to open it up for a minute for discussion to see if anybody wants to share anything they may have learned. And then we're going to do a little more work and sort of see if anyone wants to brainstorm with the group around what they've come up with. So shifts in perception. I've been talking a lot about perception. I know this is about thought leadership, but what thought leadership is building awareness, building understanding of your company or your firm in the minds of your clients and your customers. When we do this work, we often come up with a list of words or understandings that we're trying to shift. So some of the things that may have come up, and we've run into all of these before, that the organization is conservative or stuffy or old-fashioned, or on the other side, that they're really new and inexperienced, that they only do one thing, whatever it is, blank, fill in the blank, that they're expensive. The perception is that they're expensive, that they're a very top-down organization, that they're very understaffed or overworked. And one of the things that thought leadership, the work that you're doing, is how do we shift those perceptions? And the next slide, this is some examples of how we might work with a company or an organization to shift perception. And the one thing to keep in mind here is that you want to be extremely positive, that what you're trying to build, this understanding about your company, is very, very positive always. So you don't want to say not, we're not old fashioned. You want to say we're innovative we use the latest technologies, instead of being perceived as conservative. And there might be reasons to be somewhat conservative, but instead, why not try and put the idea out there that you're confident risk takers, that you're not conservative, you take risks, but you only take risks when you know that they're going to be successful, or when you're confident about the parameters. New and inexperienced, we work with a lot of startups, and these companies come, all of a sudden there's a brand new biotech company, and we've been asked to help brand them. And they say, well, how do we get people to understand that we're not we're a new company, but we're not inexperienced. Then we focus on the experts and the experienced experts. What are this team that came together? What do they bring? And this is something that even a long existing company or firm can do. If you're hiring and you hire an expert, how do you showcase that expertise and what that expertise brings to your firm? So we worked with firms that in the AEC industry that say, well, everyone thinks we're really expensive. And I said, well, are you expensive? No, we're no more expensive than anyone else when it comes down to the bottom line, but we have such great experience and such good estimating that we rarely run into cost overruns, and we stay on budget and we stay on schedule. And I said, well, that's what we talk about. We talk about how you have this understanding through experience, and you have this estimating team that's, beyond pale, and you're going to give them a price that they can hold to. So you get the idea. All right, so this is the point where it would be great if people are willing to have some discussion. Now, I understand BSA, I've worked there for a long time, that the people in this group often compete for projects, but that doesn't mean that you can't share. And if you feel comfortable sharing some of the things that you came up with, or some of the things that you'd like to highlight in your thought leadership, or perceptions you'd like to shift and you want to talk about it, what came up for you in this series of exercises? Did you learn anything new? Or are these things you think about every day?
Yeah, and I wanted to also put forward, perhaps there may be a yeah, but as you're listening to all this and it all makes sense, when you apply to your firm, there may be a yeah, but in terms of something that, theoretically should make a lot of sense, but in your case, it's a yeah, but we'd love to understand a little bit more about that.
There's also some things in chat here. Let's see what.
Mostly people letting you know that their silence means that they were being studious.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Oh, I'm glad people are listening. It's hard to know.
Oh, Sandy Kane is waving her hand.
Sandy.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I think my audio is cutting out. Sorry about that, but okay, I guess for Ascentex, yeah, but I think you guys all know who Ascentex is. Perception that we only work in New England, and we're working on that. We want to expand our national presence. So that's one thing we've been talking about a lot. So I didn't have a hard time coming up with that point. So I just wanted to put that out there, and thanks for any help with that.
Okay, so geography. Then, one way to think about it is, instead of focusing on, where the projects are, How about project types? Do you work with many different kinds of projects, or is it mostly one project type as well as one geography?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Sandy, I'll jump in with a quick response. I
work with
sorry, I hope I'm not
architects. We
interrupting.
also work with engineers. We also do environmental and transportation. I mean, we do everything. That's okay.
What I was beginning to say was that, I think that one of the terms that we use is hinge, that what you just described, Sandy, with Ascentec, which is of course a firm we all know, is a hinge issue. In other words, there's a current place that you are, and as part of a perception shift, you'd like to change that perception. So we call that, what we call it here internally, is a hinge issue. And the thing about a lot of the materials that we create is that they're essentially digital, they're virtual, they're not tangible things. And so we like to think in terms of what are our tools, that we can use these virtual tools to actually represent that future reality on some level. I mean, there are limits to what you can do. But if there is a clear issue, and sometimes we work with a firm, they'll tell us the hinge issue right at the intro of the interview. Sometimes you have to go through discovery to kind of pull out the hinge issue, and many times there are multiple hinge issues. So the one you just described is a classic hinge issue, which is this idea, look, we're regional, but we're actually want to be perceived as being more national. And so we as branding, hopefully we're at this point a little bit of experts. We would say, okay, what are the tools that we have? And one of them is to demonstrate a broader reach. And we get into like, well, what does the map look like in terms of geography, right? And sometimes, and it's a very sort of fun exercise, and oftentimes it's not successful. For example, we'll say, okay, where are all the projects that you have? Is it just strictly New England? And then you put the dots along the US map, and maybe it's just coasts, and maybe you're kind of in a way exposed. But nonetheless, that's a sort of easy way, like, let's look at projects. Well, we can look at them according to geography. And there are many ways to do it. You don't have to do it with a visual map, but you can say, New England, Northeast, US, and list the project. So you can start to, at least by having that interface, start to really demonstrate, hey, everyone, you may have thought of Ascentec as strictly New England, but actually just by having a way of getting to projects by geography, you can start to demonstrate that you're more national. And then you can also highlight projects that are, we often get into a situation where it's like, what is the criteria? Ascentec's been around for a very long time. You have an immense portfolio of projects. Okay, so what are the criteria for editing the work, which, Ascentec needs to do, given how long they've been around? Well, certainly putting forward more projects that represent that diversity from a geographic standpoint gets you there. Anyway, those are just some of the things.
Yeah, the other thing that I would add is to find commonalities among your projects that don't have to do with location, or could transcend the location in what they're in. So if you're working on college campuses, or if you're working with office buildings, there's lots of office buildings around the country. So you look at kind of the things that you're doing within that space, and then you write a piece or you do a post on LinkedIn that has to do with the challenges and the solutions for that building type that exists everywhere. Or if it's an issue with sort of enclosures and rain or something, rain's everywhere. So you can talk about sort of moisture, and there are things that you can focus on that aren't like case studies for a building here. Or if you've done several projects that are in small towns, you can talk about how a municipality overcame a certain thing, and there's lots of small towns. So trying to find the thing in your project or in your expertise that transcends location and do a post that focuses on the problem and the solution that's more universal, and then put it out there.
Perfect. Thanks, both of you. Those are both great
Yeah.
solutions. Yeah.
It's also part of what this is, and we're going to talk about this in the next section, is building audience. So you think about kind of how can you reach people that don't already know about you, because that's a big part of thought leadership. And that has to do with building audience. And you can build audience through social media. You can also build audience through publications, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But if you're looking to expand geographically, chances are you need to build that. You need to build your audience base. Anyone else want to?
Anything else? Nancy, I'm just doing a quick time check. We have a half hour to go.
Okay.
And just want to, make sure we don't get too bogged down and that we have time.
Okay. So now what? So now you have this, you've made lots of notes and you're starting to think about strategy. So this is the part where you have this, all of a sudden you're starting to think, well, how do you put that thinking into action? How do you move it into ideas into a strategy? So now, so you're starting to identify the pieces, but there's a few more sort of questions to ask yourself. You're starting to get a sense of your sauce. What's the expertise? What are the things that you want the firm to be known for? How do you, what's the tone of this? Is it a spicy sauce? Is it a traditional sauce? Is it a multi-flavored sauce or a suite of sauces? And then the next thing is how do you best tell this story? Is this something that will work best through case studies, will work best through profiling experts, will work best through visual means, video? Is it a planning thing that would work well with illustrations? So think about how do you best tell the story, and who is the audience? Is the audience existing customers? Are you trying to build more work with your client base, which is always a marketer's dream, right? These are people that know you and you want them to come back for more projects. So if that's your audience, you want them to know that you do not just X, but you do Y, Z, you do all kinds of other things. So think about your audience. Or is it, as Sandy was hoping for, an audience in a different part of the world or the country? Are you shifting perception, raising awareness, or both? Do you have one of these situations where there's a lot of misperceptions or older perceptions about your company or your firm that you want to shift? So understanding that will help you think about your strategy, how best to do it. What's the best media and what's the best platform? We were just talking a little bit about media when we were talking about the story, because some things work better in words, some things work better in pictures. Maybe we're working with a client right now that has a big anniversary, and we're working on creating an anniversary publication that can be repurposed in lots of different ways. That can be on the website, can be social media posts. It's great when you have something that you can use many ways. So that's the platform. What's the platform? So where do you publish things? There's, of course, your website. And often people's thought leadership lives on their website. So you might have an insights area or ideas or voices. There's lots of things that you can call this, and that depends on what's your firm's personality, and are you more traditional or avant-garde? That will determine what your place on your website looks like and feels like. Social media, of course, especially LinkedIn these days, more and more Instagram. Other online publishers and influencers, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. You may have your own newsletter, reports, or magazines. You don't have to be in touch with your customers every week, but keeping in touch with your existing customer base is a good way to build your business. And you all know this, you've been working in this industry for a long time. So how do you do that? We all have email fatigue, and often it's to multi-purpose your content, and not to try and, your newsletter, it doesn't have to scroll like a long website homepage. It could be one or two items. And presentations and webinars. So what Tim and I are doing right now is talking about our thought leadership, what we know, what we're experts in, and bringing that to an audience. And you have that opportunity to do that too. So when we're looking at online publishers and influencers, it's amazing. I worked for a while, as Kate was talking about, at North Bennett Street School, and I was director of communications and strategic partnerships. So one of my jobs was to find places to talk about the school. And it's amazing how many other organizations and publishers are looking for content. You might not think so. You might think, okay, SCUP, or Inside Higher Ed or Higher Ed Facilities Forum. If you do higher ed, this is one example. And I've made this list in about 10 minutes doing a little internet research. So, there's, you might think that Higher Ed Facilities Forum has all the content they need, but the reality is they're probably dying for someone else to write an article for them. And, so you can, don't be afraid to contact these publishers. If you can get some kind of little article, and it's not bombarding them with press releases, it's developing a relationship or pitching stories. Hey, we have this idea. I have this idea for a story that I think your readers might like. You have to do a little research, but these things can be very fruitful in terms of getting your firm's expertise out into the world. So what do you do next? You spend time looking at other firms and companies' websites and social media, and we have a few examples to show you. Get familiar with hashtags on LinkedIn. Get familiar with groups on LinkedIn. If you aren't already participating in groups in LinkedIn, it's a nice way to repost things that your firm is doing within a broader audience. It can help raise more national awareness. I don't think groups get quite as much eyeballs as other things, but people do pay attention to them, especially some of the ones that are moderated. And you can, of course, do paid posts as well. Continue to research social media strategies. Tim and I know a little bit about social media, but we're all still learning. There's a lot online that can help you understand how best to use LinkedIn. LinkedIn itself has great tutorials on how to use that platform. Follow other companies and hashtags. It's okay to copy. It's okay to, not plagiarize, but copy the way firms are doing things or the kinds of stories that people are publishing. Look at what's getting reactions, what's getting hits, and think about that. Find publishers to partner with, as we were talking about. It's amazing. People are always looking for good content. Build followers and fans. So, really try and use your colleagues to help you do this. Because if everyone in your firm, or if you have a group, put together a social media committee and have people give you ideas for things to post or to do it, to give people permission to post on behalf of the firm. And look for the writers, look for people who want to share their ideas, and look throughout the firm. It could be a junior person who actually loves to write, who's so excited about their new job with the firm and the projects they're working on. They could become your biggest advocate. And you might not think of them as a thought leader, and yet, with your editing assistants and working together and collaborating with them, you could build yourself a little team of people that want to post on your behalf. If they're out in the field, get them to take photos. People love to see projects being done or love to see things being made. If you're like me and you also personally follow Instagram and things, I love to watch videos of things happening. It's a great way to build your LinkedIn following and to show your thought leadership. If you're a firm that's out in the field doing things, people need to see that. So this is where I was going to open it up again to see if people wanted to brainstorm any more. Alternatively, we could slide through our examples and then open it up again, but I'll pause right now and see if anyone shouts out or waves or put something in chat. Crickets. I hear.
I have 100,000 questions. I just don't want to be the only one jumping in. And Sandy already did it, so it's somebody else's turn.
Well, think about your questions while we go through these examples, okay? So just in order of making sure we keep time at the end, and we'll really pull up the discussion then and get rid of the slides. So examples. When Tim and I were on a Zoom call a couple months ago or a month ago with Kate and Marcia, we asked them, who do you look at? Who do you admire for how they put their thought leadership out there? Or what firms do you think of as thought leadership firms? And these are a couple that they suggested, maybe one or two that Tim and I thought of. Gensler is, of course, it's a huge worldwide firm. So of course they have the money, they have the resources to put into their thought leadership. And yet we can learn a lot by looking at them and looking at sort of what the kind of things that they're doing. You know, most, when I was at the BSA, you know, I understood that most firms do some kind of research. I mean, you're all researching things all the time. So it doesn't have to be a 20-page report, but if you have done some research on 18th century, you know, masonry buildings or whatever, maybe that doesn't even exist, but brick buildings, and you spent some time doing this research, your firm did, in order to work on a project, maybe there's a little something you can publish about that research that somebody did. Or if you were looking at campuses with rivers that run through them, I don't know. So what we have here is their homepage, their thought leadership page or their insight page, and their LinkedIn banner. And the LinkedIn banner I included there to, you know, they have 360,000 followers. We're smaller here in Boston, most of us, but that doesn't mean we can't aspire to great things. Payette is a local firm. It's not a small firm, but it's not a huge firm. And I think I think it was Kate mentioned that she thinks that they just have this great energy around the thought leadership that they did, and their posts and what they're putting on their blog. And so that was a good one to take a look at. And they have, 7,000 followers. That's a good number of followers, and probably have been building that through these posts that they've been doing. And you can get a sense, once again, of the tone and the culture and personality of the firm by looking just at these three images. Sasaki, also very well known. They're very, their Voices Archive, which is what they call their thought leadership page. It's very magazine-like, images and titles. And often these things are searchable, which is a nice way to show your expertise across different areas. Simpson, Gumpertz, and Hager really doing lots of thought leadership in the engineering space, and out there in lots of different ways. A good one to look at for in the industry for how they're taking their projects and making thought leadership about their projects. These things, if you click into them, they're not press releases. It talks about ideas. So that's another way to think about thought leadership, is instead of saying you finished this project, you talk about what went into the project. What did you learn on this project? What were the insights gained from this one project? That's thought leadership. That you finished it and it has X square feet, and is marketing, but not thought leadership. Karen Timberlake, well-known sustainability firm, really picked their their stake and have stuck with it, and have been publishing thought leadership and well known because of it, because they have this one thing. And that's another sort of thing to think about. Are you a firm that has a specific expertise or has a goal of being perceived as experts in one way, or are you across multiple disciplines? Both can work, but understanding what you're trying to do will help you understand the best way to do it. HOK, another big firm, global firm. And look at this right here on their homepage: projects, ideas, people, and studios. So it's about ideas as much as it's about projects. CBT, local firm, has a nice filtered section on ideas. They put news and ideas together. That's another strategy that can help you sort of build your content in that area, so that you can filter by ideas, or you can filter by the latest news. And this is where I'm going to turn it over to Tim, although, do you want to?
Any questions or thoughts about the examples? I mean, there's certainly larger firms, and it's not to say smaller firms can't operate at the same level, but smaller in scale. Certainly, Nancy talked about the budgets that larger firms have to generate thought leadership. But I think the lessons are there for all firms in a way. And, certainly we're focused on the website, but I'm very active. Although, sometimes I'm a little bit quiet for a month or two. I'm very active on LinkedIn and use that. Again, we're a small firm. And so I use LinkedIn as a journal, a personal journal, for what I see out in the world relative to my expertise, which is typically, in branding. That's typically what I post on. For example, my 3 children over the last 4 or 5 years, we've done a ton of college searches and visited a lot of campuses. So I did a post that had to do with college logos, because I just found it really interesting. I still find it interesting how colleges and universities market themselves as a branding person, but just the logo itself. So I'm out in the world and, I'm seeing, University of Miami has a pretty distinctive logo, the U, right? So I posted on that. And that was just, again, it was a travel journal of sorts. So even a small firm, I look at CBT or HOK, they're operating at a very different scale, but that simple example is something that I enjoy doing, and it happens organically. And I find it also pretty fun. And what it does is it supports this idea that, for lack of a better word, that I am expert in this idea about branding and logo design and the way in which I talk about it. Whether I am an expert or not, that's my goal. And the way I talk about it also is important. The words I choose, bringing insight, is important. That's the attempt. Whether I'm successful, you all have to be the judge. But anyway, so look, I picked 2 examples. We have limited time here, and I wanted, I'm in a way picking 2 extremes. One is a logo, and thinking it's not necessarily, I think the larger umbrella that we're talking about today is this idea of perception and shift. So I'm giving 2 examples, and one is a logo. Can a logo actually reinforce a perception shift? And I'm going to say yes. And the other example is on the opposite extreme, which is a strategy that literally uses words to change perception. So anyway, let's talk about this first one. I think everyone knows Reed Hildebrand. We've done a number of websites for them, and we recently did a new brand identity. And, this firm is really interesting to watch their trajectory. They were a small firm that I worked with when I was an architect. Now, of course, they're a national brand. And let's go back to the original. Sorry, Nancy. So, what was going on with the firm? This is not uncommon. They have been around where Doug and Gary were no longer the sole leaders of the firm. And they were in this interesting transition, which a lot of firms go to, where it's not just the names on the door anymore. They really were about, it wasn't leadership transition, at this point. It was more about just giving this perception. It's not just about Doug and Gary anymore, that they really had cultivated a much broader leadership base of the firm. And so this was the existing logo that we were given. And the new logo, and now let's look at the new logo. And you see that the old logo really distinguishes Reed and Hildebrand. In this case, we wanted to, in a way, break down the distinction between the two names. And so we came up with this larger, simple logo type, Reed, Hildebrand, as kind of one form. And it's kind of linked. And then let's go to the next slide. And what you're seeing in this representation is the three different manifestations of the brand. And again, I always say that the logo is the hardest thing that we do. And it's not to say that I don't think we're good at it. It's just the most difficult and challenging because it's, for one, the most subjective, right? I've gone into presentations where I'd have a firm leader say, no, I don't like the color green. I just don't. And it's also a pretty crude expression. I mean, it's really just, you have a fixed number of parts, right? You've got typography, color, form, shapes. And so, to be able to communicate something is it's hard to do, to create meaning, and meaning's super important. So in this logo, we've got three representations. One is the linear strip of Reed Hildebrand. The other you see is Reed Hildebrand stacked. And even the idea of brand was an interesting coincidence, right? So what we talk about, and then of course the RH, right? And that is a type of brand. And so what I've said, and I'm an architect, so forgive me, but we've dematerialized the original brand by breaking it down into a series of different parts that de-emphasize the name of the two partners, so that Reed Hildebrand becomes its own idea, its own meaning as a thing that's different from Gary and Doug. Reed Hildebrand. And so it's super simple. Is it super obvious? No. But I think that it contributes to this idea that it's no longer about Doug and Gary. So that's one extreme. Okay, now we're going to talk about something different. LeMessurier, we've had the pleasure of working with LeMessurier and continue to work with LeMessurier for probably a decade at this point. They came to us, LeMessurier consultants, and one of the first things we convinced them is to drop consultants, because we all know LeMessurier. LeMessurier is the gold standard for engineering in this, certainly in this city, Northeast, New England, and potentially you could argue nationally. And so we said, look, you're better than just being consultants. And so the next step was to cut the consultant, just be LeMessurier. And we put this sort of new brand period as a way of making that distinction. It's a very simple mark. They're a conservative, somewhat conservative group. Engineering, I think you want your engineer to be somewhat conservative. And so we came up with a conservative typeface, but we also pumped up this really fun, vibrant color. But that's not why we're talking about LeMessurier today. Let's go to the next slide. So this was their website. We're doing a new website for them. This is the website that we did for them probably 5 years ago. And what happened in the last year is LeMessurier has acquired an enclosures group. And we wanted to shift perception in a very literal way. So this is their existing homepage. But their new homepage, Nancy, is here. And so we came up with this idea for a homepage. You see all these terms, and we came up with this vehicle, which is Engineers For, as this baseline for what is LeMessurier. Well, LeMessurier at its base, they are engineers. And we then cycle through all these words that have to do with current thinking about our environment, which has to do with sustainability, resiliency, building analytics. Certainly everyone knows LeMessurier is about structures. That's not important. I mean, it is important, but it's not the reason why we did this. What we wanted to really drive forward is this idea. First of all, you see building enclosures there. We are engineers for building enclosures right on the homepage. And we also have ideas about sustainability. So they cycle through as a way of shifting perception in a very direct way that, hey, we're not just structural engineers. We're also engineers for building enclosures. And we're also part of the 21st century conversation about building, which has to do with sustainability and resiliency. So there were a number of goals of this simple intervention to the homepage. And that you can go back, Nancy, actually. And that's really it. They're two extremes about how you operate in terms of perception shift. One is like an abstract idea, which is the retail brand. The other is really like straight and arrow. What is a type of campaign of sorts to change the perception that the measure is just about structural engineering?
Are we done?
I'm done.
And I'm gonna pause it here because this has our contact information. We encourage you to write to us if you have additional questions. Someone asked for the list of the firms that we gave as an example, and I'll make sure that Kate and Marcia get that. And this whole slide thing, if that's helpful. I think that in my closing comment, I'll just say that what I think is important and what I think this may have brought up is to be strategic, to think first about what is it you're trying to say and what are the ideas that you're trying to communicate, and then build your thought leadership campaigns from that strategy, so that it's intentional, and it'll be easier to do that way because you'll get excited about sort of trying to build some perception around this special sauce that is your unique firm. And I think we have like 4 minutes or 6 minutes to open it up for questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We'll make sure you get our contact information again as well, if that's helpful. And see if anybody has any, thanks for the nice comments in the chat. And see if anybody wants to brainstorm or comment about anything before we let Kate and Marcia close us out. Goes fast, 75 minutes.
This is Matt Flynn from Goody Clancy. When talking about perception, I'm curious how you make a distinction across a variety of parties. You know, who is perceiving. We're talking about, you know, a lot of this, we're talking about clientele, who's going to hire us next, but there's also the perception from potential new employees and who's the, you know, who are the best of the best young people who are just graduating college. How are they seeing our firms, you know, and is that different? Is there a distinction between them? So, and then there's the competitors too. And I think they're all very important to consider how they are perceiving your firm, but it seems like there are a variety of different ways.
Absolutely. And you know, in branding, they call it personas, right? Like what are the different personas that a firm would have? And certainly, you know, prospective employees is hugely important. We've done projects with noted and highly prolific firms that don't have any problem getting work. What they really want are the best and the brightest. And so, wow, it's pretty amazing to step back and think about a body of work that's just focused on not potentially an audience of clients, but an audience of the best and the brightest, and what that means. We're working with a number of firms that have this older white male issue. And boy, you know, that's potentially challenging, but again, an interesting challenge to grapple with in terms of perception. And I think, Matt, you know, the issue about audiences, I mean, you know, we work with firms that have a number of different market sectors, and boy, that's also challenging. For example, there's some market sectors that don't sit comfortably next to each other, like higher ed and commercial, for example. And some firms do both, but boy, higher ed doesn't coexist. I mean, maybe as time is going on, they are getting more commercial, but nonetheless, historically, there's been a kind of discomfort between those two audiences. So, you know, how do you speak both each silo's language? That's also pretty challenging. So yeah, those are all very interesting questions that you've raised.
Yeah, I have a slightly different take on it, and that's that it's important, and it's important to consider and to test your materials, your marketing, your perception with different audiences. But it's also important to build one unified brand. That what you don't want to do is start trying to appeal to your new employees one way and your future clients a different way. That you will be stronger if you are one cohesive brand, and you're a strong brand, and you will attract employees that way. Doesn't mean that you don't have areas on your website that might be more appeal, in the careers page, you're going to be showing the collaborative culture, young people, that kind of excitement, but they're also going to go to your ideas page, and they're going to want to know that you are leaders, that you are thoughtful, that you have doing exciting projects. So in a way, they're going to be thinking about the same kind of things as your future clients will be. They're going to want to be part of what you do because you're experts in what you're doing, and because you're confident and you're risk takers and you're strong. So in that way, I would say build one hell of a strong brand, and the people will come.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi, I have a question. I was going to throw it out there.
Yeah.
And I know from previous experience, a lot of times you've come in and you've branded and you've rebranded the same firm. Obviously, you gave LeMessurier as an example. And you said the LeMessurier rebrand was a 5-year interval. So is the interval or the need to change and rebrand a firm, is that duration getting shorter and shorter these days with social media, people's attention spans? Can a classic look last longer than 5 years? I guess I'm just wondering what you're seeing now. And, if someone has a really strong brand, obviously a college or university, my alma mater changed their brand, and it got so much negative feedback online. Everyone was like, they were talking about the brand. It was a little too contemporary. It didn't work. So, sometimes brands do work and last for a while. And other times, with social media, maybe it's just a matter of refreshing a website, but keeping a look. So I guess I'm curious about shelf life these days. Is it changing? The longer we go, are things getting shorter and shorter? Or, what stands the test of time in your mind?
I definitely don't feel personally that brands need to wholesale shift. I think they need to evolve. And the examples I gave, like Reed Hildebrand, I don't expect that logo to change for a very long time, actually. I mean, I could be wrong, but that logo we did for them 5-6 years ago, I don't anticipate them changing that. LeMessurier, same thing. That logo has been about 5 years old. I don't anticipate that changing. So, but I think LeMessurier is much more just evolving. Like as a firm, they made this acquisition. They wanted to broaden their service offerings. And so that was just an evolving, but I think the overall brand for both those firms actually is the same. I think they're known for certain things, and that doesn't really change. They just evolve and grow. So I definitely don't feel the need. Our own logo is, gosh, it's actually certainly more than 10 years old. I'm not feeling the need to change it, but we do evolve. So I don't know if that answers your question, Alicia, but I don't feel the need that there's this like
more
new
curiosity.
idea that you run out. Change your logo.
I think like a lot of what we're talking about, there needs to be a reason to do it. In the measure, it was a strategic business decision or an evolution of the firm. Sometimes it's because the old website doesn't work anymore because it's not I think everyone has responsive websites now, but there was a period of time where everyone had to do a website. And when you're having moments like that, that's a time to think about everything, and to see what might need to shift a little bit. It's if you look at the Apple brand logo or Coca-Cola over time, you'll see that it's changed, and yet you don't know that it's changed in a way, because you can also shift your brand and evolve your brand as just through time. And they don't have to be like a college and university, totally rechanging how the brand feels. It can feel very similar, but still be evolving. But that, once again, it's a strategy. So it depends. And, you know, of course, Tim and I are happy to talk with any of you about sort of where you are. And if you're thinking about that, or if you're not even sure, we're happy to consult with you.
Well, we're at and slightly over time, so but we still have questions coming in. So I want to first of all just say thank you, Nancy, thank you, Tim, and then ask if you have a couple of minutes and you want to stay and answer a question or two.
Of course.
And thank you everybody who joined us this morning. We appreciate all of the participation and the thought provocation. And now on with the additional questions. So Michelle Douglas had a question. Michelle, do you want to shout it out, or would you like me to read it from the chat? Let me give Michelle 30 seconds to find her mute button. All right, I will shout it out on Michelle's behalf. It was when you're getting started with this kind of work, who do you involve in the process? Is there a recommended group size that you have found to be easier to work with when you're working through ideas like what is our thought leadership? What are we doing well, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
A lot of that has to do with the culture of your firm, but I do recommend, or we do recommend, that you involve others in the process. I think that ideally you want to work with a cross section of your group. So include a principal or two, but make sure you include those younger people that have ideas that and that might have energy or expertise that can be helpful. They might be drone photographers that you didn't know about in your firm. There may be, great writers in your firm. And those are people that you want to involve in this because they can help shape that work moving forward. So, if you're a firm that if you're comfortable doing an open call to who's interested and having one big general meeting and then having people volunteer to be part of a smaller committee, as we all know, if your committee has more than 8 people, it's going to start feeling unwieldy, or you're not going to get everyone together all the time. But even having 3 or 4 people that you can brainstorm with regularly in our small marketing departments, it's helpful. So. Tim, did you have anything to add to that? Or?
I agree with the culture thing. I don't know. I mean, it's in some cases, I really believe that the best campaigns happen organically. I don't know. I mean, you could certainly hire us, but I never think that's a good idea. I think that it's better if you can somehow cultivate an organic response to the problem of social media. And I would say, again, I'll use my own experience. 4 or 5 years ago, it was embarrassing that my firm, wasn't active in social media. And it was just this kind of thing that was an open wound for a branding firm that wasn't doing it. And so I, in a way, forced myself initially to do it, right? And then all of a sudden I realized I liked it. This idea of the journal, personal journal that is related to what I see out in the world. And then once you're in, you kind of get addicted to the hits, right? You get addicted to holy cow, I got 50 likes on this one. That's so exciting. You find yourself checking it every hour and it's almost embarrassing. But then you know what it means? You're in. And you're also seeing what other people are doing. And so then you realize, wow, this is exactly what happens. And you can certainly talk about the addictive, negative nature of what our children are getting absorbed into. But nonetheless, now I'm in and I enjoy it. So that's really what you want to get. Whoever it is, whether I consider myself an older person. I'm not one of these millennial that's doing it all the time. So I made the shift somehow, and it started with being in a way forced to do it. I did it mechanically, but then over time, you suddenly, Instagram now, I don't post, but I follow Instagram. That's the best. And then, I have Nancy now that helps. And she also creates her own sort of areas of interest. So now we're a bit of a team. Nancy's kind of creating articles for our website that get posted to social media. So we've kind of built it up step by step. And, but it's best when it happens organically. When you take an old guy and somehow get him over the line into realizing this is actually kind of fun.
Great.
Like writing, I enjoy writing, I enjoy thinking, and I now use social media as a vehicle for me to continue to do that. And it also helps my business. So anyway.
One thing I was chatting with a colleague about, and we didn't ask the question earlier, but we were wondering about the first round of questions that you asked us, which included who are your experts and what is their expertise? And we understood that that's a way of getting at what your firm, does that differentiates it from other firms potentially. To what extent does the sort of highlighting of individual experts perhaps become a strong part of thought leadership? Do you cultivate thought leadership in your firm by cultivating thought leaders, specific leaders? I don't know. It feels like there's.
Well, I think it's an important question. I strategically, and I've seen both, right? I think that for me, I find it much more interesting when I see an individual posting about their expertise. Again, I'm using LinkedIn, certainly Instagram works that way, as opposed to a company. But again, companies can have reasons why they don't want to do that. What if that resource leaves? Does the thought leadership, the expertise leave with them? So there are important questions to ask. There are ways of doing both. For example, we have a client that has the company, the company profile, right? And they post from that company profile, but then they have individuals within the firm sending that company post out to personalize it. So, but in general, I do if there isn't a compelling reason, like from a business or IP standpoint, to let individuals come out and be the experts, because I think they're most, especially if they're principals, they're not going anywhere. They're partners. I think it's really depends on the firm, but I think it's a great question for sure.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think that you can have your experts byline a post and yet post from the company, post on the company website or from the company LinkedIn page, and build awareness of individuals as experts, because they may get asked to come and present to a group or talk about their expertise. So I think that you can do it, and my recommendation is that you're still doing it as a firm, and building the firm as the home for those experts, and doing it that way. So I follow a lot of architects on LinkedIn, and they're posting all the time, but they're very much associated with their firm. And I think that there's certainly no reason not to do it, not to highlight your experts. This has been fun.
Yeah, thank you all. Really great. It's been too long, and hope to see you all. I see again a lot of familiar faces, and hope to see you all in real time at some point soon.
Thank you both very much. A lot of food for thought here.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Pun intended.
Yep.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Happy holidays.